At this point, I just wish the nightmare would be over. I wish it was all a bad dream and that we would wake up and that they would still be here.
Have you ever wondered if you truly understand the people you live with? Behind closed doors, how many secrets remain hidden beyond our wildest imagination? Sometimes, the most terrifying things don't come from the outside world. They stem from those we trust the most. It was a peaceful morning in Oklahoma when a 10-year-old boy woke up from a deep sleep. In his mind, today would surely be just another ordinary day, filled with the laughter of his parents and brothers. But it wasn't. As he stepped out of his room, he immediately sensed something was off. The air in the house was colder than usual, heavy enough to make him pause. He softly called out, "Mom? Dad?" But the only response was an eerie silence. Taking a few steps toward the living room, he froze in place. Before him lay his entire family motionless on the floor, his father, mother, and 3 beloved brothers all gone. No sounds, no signs of life. In his panic, he fought through his fear to dial 911. When his trembling voice reached the operator, he could only say one thing: they're gone. But what sent chills down everyone's spines wasn't just the scene itself, it was the dark truth hidden behind this tragedy. The person responsible wasn't a stranger or an anonymous intruder. It was his father, Jonathan Candy. Jonathan, a man loved by friends and neighbors, once considered the ideal family man, had ended the lives of his wife and 3 sons before taking his own. The youngest boy survived, but was that truly a blessing? His entire world collapsed in a single night. What drove Jonathan to commit such an act? Was it hidden pressures he bore alone, or a darkness no one ever saw? I'm Alex Harper, a freelance investigator. Today, we're delving into this harrowing story, not just to uncover the truth, but to draw valuable lessons about life. If you enjoy this kind of content, please hit the subscribe button and like this video to encourage me to bring you more shocking stories. Now, let's dive deep into the case. The Candy family, a perfect facade. The Candy family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Oklahoma where everyone knew each other and often stopped by to chat. They weren't just an ordinary family. They were beloved for their warm and friendly nature. Jonathan Candy, a 42-year-old father, was the kind of person who brought smiles to everyone around him. With his humor and approachable demeanor, he was often referred to as the soul of the neighborhood. Jonathan wasn't just the husband and father of 4 children, he was also the ideal neighbor. Always ready to lend a hand, whether it was mowing a lawn, fixing a leaky roof, or simply offering a friendly ear on tough days. Neighbors still recall the image of Jonathan with his sons. On warm afternoons, as the sun began to set, they'd see him playing basketball in the driveway with his 4 boys. The sound of laughter and the rhythmic bounce of the ball on concrete became a familiar melody. Dylan, the eldest at 18, always led the games with a confident smile. Ethan, 14, though younger, never backed down from a challenge. Lucas, 12, worked hard to keep up with his older brothers, while the youngest cheered them on from the sidelines. Lindsay Candy, the mother, was the embodiment of love and joy in the family. She had a way of making everyone feel special. Whether it was baking treats for neighborhood events or decorating cakes with meticulous care, her kindness left an indelible mark. Her warm smile and comforting words were always there for anyone in need. Looking at pictures of the Candy family, I can't help but wonder, how could a family that seemed so perfect end in such a tragedy? Were there smiles in those photos hiding something no one could see? The ideal family in the eyes of others. To those around them, the Candy family was often called the ideal family. Polite children, loving parents, and a united front at every neighborhood event. Lindsay never missed one of Ethan's baseball games, cheering enthusiastically with a self-made sign in hand. Her youngest son often clung to her side, weaving excitedly as she cheered for his older brothers. Memories of the Candy family were filled with admiration and warmth. A neighbor once shared,
Him and his kids seemed like they always got along. He just was I don't know, just a family man.
The hidden signs behind the smile. Behind the radiant smiles and the picture-perfect facade of the Candy family, there may have been pressures no one noticed. Jonathan worked part-time at an event management center. His job was far from stable, and while he always joked and laughed with others, did anyone truly know what he was enduring inside? Financial stress, the responsibility of raising 4 children, and unspoken burdens may have weighed heavily on him. From the outside, everyone thought the Candy family was living in happiness. But did anyone stop to ask, is Jonathan really okay? Is Lindsay truly as joyful as she seems? Are the kids hiding something they're too afraid to share with their parents? These questions send chills down your spine when you consider what happened. Jonathan, the father once seen as the family's pillar, had destroyed the very home he built. But what drove him to this breaking point? Was it the accumulation of unbearable pressure, or a shadow in his mind no one ever noticed? The Candy family story not only makes us mourn the lives lost, but forces us to question our relationships with those around us. Sometimes, smiles and kind words can conceal pain we might never imagine. So how do we truly understand and support our loved ones? The answer isn't easy, but it's a question we must ponder as we continue uncovering this case. April 22nd, 2024. A quiet stillness blanketed the suburban neighborhood in Oklahoma. The morning sun cast a soft glow through the windows of the modest Candy family home. To an outsider, it was just another ordinary morning, but for the Candy family's youngest, a 10-year-old boy, it was the moment that would change his life forever. Have you ever thought about how a seemingly normal day could end in unimaginable tragedy? That 10-year-old boy woke up, thinking it would be a day like any other. But no one knew that within minutes of opening his eyes, his entire world would collapse. A journey out of the bedroom. The boy woke up, still groggy with sleep, and sensed something different about the house. The ceiling fan hummed softly in the corner, but everything else was eerily silent. There was no laughter from his brothers or the familiar sound of his mother calling from the kitchen. The stillness was unlike anything he had ever felt before. He climbed out of bed, his bare feet touching the cold wooden floor. Opening his bedroom door, he faced the hallway, which seemed unnervingly long that morning. His small footsteps echoed faintly in the emptiness. The boy didn't realize he was walking through a house that had already lost its heartbeat. Every step, every glance was leading him closer to a horrifying truth. But as a child, he couldn't possibly understand what awaited him. A terrifying discovery. Reaching the living room, the boy stopped in his tracks. Before him was a scene no child should ever witness. His father, mother, and 3 brothers lay motionless on the floor, blood pooled and darkened on the wooden surface beneath them. He stood there, frozen, unable to move. Panic surged through him as he tried to speak, his voice breaking, "Mom? Dad?" But the only response was the suffocating silence. It was a moment no child should ever endure. A 10-year-old boy standing at the center of a tragedy where his loved ones had vanished forever. Fear, pain, and an overwhelming sense of loss collided in his young mind. The fateful call. After a few minutes of stunned disbelief, the boy found a sliver of composure. He ran to the nearest phone and dialed 911. His voice, shaky and fragmented, could only manage, "They're gone." The dispatcher immediately alerted the authorities, and within minutes, sirens pierced the tranquil neighborhood. Red and blue lights flickered against the walls of the Candy home as police and paramedics arrived at the scene. Forensic teams and officers entered the house, their expressions heavy with the weight of what lay inside. The officers didn't just step into a home, they entered a nightmare. What they saw was more than just the tragedy of one family. It was a glimpse into unimaginable suffering. Everyone asked the same questions. Why? And how did it come to this? The scene of a tragedy. Police discovered the bodies of Lindsay, Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas scattered throughout the home. Some were found on the ground floor, others upstairs. There were no signs of struggle or resistance. Everything had happened swiftly, as if the victims never had a chance to understand what was unfolding. Jonathan Candy, the father, was found with a fatal wound. Beside him lay the weapon, a grim testament to the fact that he had taken his own life after ending the lives of his family. When I think about that scene, I don't just see loss. I see betrayal, pain, and unanswered questions. How could a father, someone trusted so deeply, destroy the very family he was meant to protect? How did it all come to this without anyone noticing a single warning sign? Unanswered questions. As the crime scene was cordoned off, neighbors gathered outside. Shocked and confused, they tried to piece together what had happened. No one could believe that the Candy family, the people they had loved and seen laughing every day, were now just a memory. The neighbors stood outside, watching the flashing lights, all asking the same question. Why? Why did a seemingly happy family meet such a tragic end? What pushed Jonathan Candy, a kind and devoted father, into such a dark corner of his mind? That fateful morning marked not just the end of a family, but also left an entire community grappling with an unanswerable question. The 10-year-old boy, the sole survivor, would grow up haunted by the trauma of that day, never fully understanding why it had to happen. That morning changed everything, not just for the boy, but for everyone who knew the Candy family. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a stark reminder that we never truly know what lies behind the facade of those we trust the most. Jonathan Candy was once the kind of husband and father everyone admired. Friends and neighbors described him in the same way: cheerful, kind, and always willing to lend a hand. But the tragedy he caused made everyone reevaluate. Was there a side of him no one had ever noticed? Jonathan Candy, the ideal father figure. On the surface, Jonathan embodied the perfect father. He spent time with his children, joined them in sports, and supported their academic pursuits. Dylan, the eldest son, once told his friends that his father was the biggest cheerleader in the family. Despite working part-time at the Paycom Center, Jonathan never missed an important event in his children's lives. Jonathan wasn't just a father. He was a close friend to his children. Dylan described his dad as his hero, someone he was proud to talk about with his friends. But now, that once-admired image has become a source of heartbreak. Neighbors often saw Jonathan taking evening strolls with his kids, telling them jokes or teaching them life lessons. One evening, he even hosted a small backyard party to celebrate his youngest son's birthday. The laughter and joy of that day now remain only as bittersweet memories. Lindsay Candy, the wife and partner. If Jonathan was the family's pillar, Lindsay was the glue holding it all together. She was described as a woman with a constant smile, the emotional anchor for her children. Neighbors recalled Lindsay as a vibrant and energetic woman. She often organized small gatherings for the neighborhood's women, exchanging parenting tips and baking recipes. Her lively spirit made her someone everyone admired. However, as investigators delved deeper, they uncovered a side of Lindsay that wasn't as carefree. As the primary breadwinner, she carried significant financial responsibilities, working tirelessly to ensure her children had everything they needed. It makes me wonder, did financial pressures contribute to Jonathan's feelings of inadequacy? When the man of the house feels unable to fulfill his role as a provider, it can deeply wound his self-esteem and lead to dark thoughts no one else perceives. Jonathan was known for his cheerful demeanor, but those closer to him noticed that he had become increasingly withdrawn in recent months. A close friend shared that Jonathan once confided, "Sometimes I feel like I'm on the sidelines. Everything feels beyond my control." At first glance, it seemed like an offhand remark, but in hindsight, it may have been a glaring sign of his mental turmoil. Jonathan's financial struggles were no secret. His part-time job at the Paycom Center brought in a modest income, far from sufficient to support a family of 6. Meanwhile, Lindsay, as the primary earner, may have unintentionally added to Jonathan's sense of inadequacy. This story isn't just about a single tragedy. It's a reflection of the silent battles many people fight daily. How many Jonathans are out there, smiling on the outside while crumbling within? And how can we, as a community, learn to recognize the signs before it's too late? Investigations revealed that on the night before the tragedy, Jonathan and Lindsay had a heated argument. Although the exact details remain unclear, those close to the couple noted that their disagreements had been growing over time. A friend of Lindsay recalled, "Lindsay once told me she felt Jonathan was becoming distant. He laughed less, avoided family activities, and seemed to be retreating into himself." These conflicts may have simmered beneath the surface for months, erupting on that fateful night. What I can't help but wonder is this: was that argument the direct trigger for the tragedy? Or was it simply the breaking point after months of unrelieved pressure that Jonathan could no longer bear? Depression in men often goes unnoticed. Instead of expressing sadness or seeking help, they tend to mask their feelings. Common signs include withdrawal, avoidance of communication, or sudden irritability without clear reasons. Jonathan may have been battling this silently. A neighbor mentioned that in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, they often saw Jonathan sitting alone in the backyard, staring into space as if lost in his thoughts. We often think of silence as a search for peace, but sometimes it's a cry for help. If Jonathan had been able to seek support in time, could the Candy family have been spared this tragedy? Looking back on Jonathan Candy's life, no one could reconcile how a loving father could commit such a horrific act against his own family. Neighbors and friends were left asking themselves, did we miss something? Were there signs we failed to recognize? These haunting questions not only tormented those who knew the Candy family, but also struck a chord with anyone who heard about their story. Jonathan Candy's story is not just a personal tragedy, it's a wake-up call for all of us. It underscores the importance of listening, observing, and being ready to offer help, even when it's not explicitly asked for. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it. If you notice someone growing quieter, if you see even the smallest shift in their behavior, take the time to reach out. Sometimes, a single conversation can save a life. A crime scene without clues. When police completed their investigation of the scene, they found the case deeply puzzling. There was no evidence of prior domestic violence, no cries for help from Lindsay or the children, no signs of a struggle. This led everyone to the same question: how could a seemingly perfect family fall into such a tragedy? Can you imagine it? A family with no history of conflict, no visible signs of violence, suddenly meeting such an unimaginable end. What really happened inside that house? Was it a moment of uncontrollable rage or a plan meticulously calculated over time? Police and psychologists considered the possibility that financial pressures may have been a key factor in Jonathan's actions. His part-time job provided an unstable income, while Lindsay bore most of the family's financial burden. Though there was no concrete evidence of debt, the imbalance in household responsibilities might have deeply affected Jonathan's sense of worth. Dr. Joni Johnston, a clinical psychologist, observed, "Financial strain isn't just a material issue, it has profound emotional consequences. For some, especially men, failing to fulfill the role of a provider can create a sense of inadequacy, leading to depression and uncontrollable thoughts." Did Jonathan feel like he no longer mattered to his family? That he couldn't live up to his role as a husband and father? If so, this serves as a stark reminder. Invisible pressures must be identified and addressed before it's too late. As neighbors and friends grappled with the reality of the Candy family's fate, the story became a cautionary tale. People who once admired Jonathan and Lindsay were now questioning their own ability to recognize distress in others. The Candy family tragedy isn't just a story of loss, it's a mirror reflecting the silent battles many people face. It reminds us that behind every smile, there might be pain. Behind every laugh, a cry for help. And it's up to us to pay attention, to ask questions, and to offer support before those cries go unheard. Depression, the silent villain. Beyond financial pressure, investigators considered the possibility that Jonathan was battling psychological issues he kept hidden. Depression, particularly in men, is often hard to detect. Those suffering from it tend to mask their true emotions, maintaining a facade of normalcy to avoid scrutiny. A study by the American Psychological Association highlights that men often express depression through irritability, withdrawal, or even reckless behavior. Jonathan may have been caught in this downward spiral without anyone, not even his wife or children, noticing. Capable of pushing someone to act against their nature. Jonathan may have been trapped in his mental darkness for so long that he saw no way out. One of the most perplexing questions in this case is why Jonathan spared his youngest son. In similar cases, when the motive is family annihilation, all members typically become victims. Yet in this instance, Jonathan stopped short of harming the boy. One theory suggests that, in his final moments, Jonathan's conscience resurfaced. Perhaps he realized the boy was too young to bear the consequences of his actions and decided to spare him. Could this be a sign of a last flicker of conscience? That Jonathan, even in a moment of madness, still harbored some love for his youngest child? Or is it something beyond our understanding? Another theory posits that the youngest son might have had a special connection with Jonathan. Psychologists note that in some cases, perpetrators may spare someone they see as a part of themselves. The ongoing investigation. Police thoroughly searched the Candy home, combing through phones, computers, and Jonathan's bank accounts for clues to his motive. Yet, everything appeared normal. There was no suicide note, no ominous messages hinting at what was to come. The absence of any clear evidence only deepens the mystery. Jonathan, a man with no history of violence or unusual behavior, suddenly commits an unthinkable act. This reminds us that sometimes the darkest tragedies come not from strangers, but from those we think we know best. Psychologists emphasized that this case serves as a wake-up call for the importance of addressing mental health. Many, particularly men, still hesitate to discuss their emotions or seek help when struggling. This isolation can lead to an inability to cope. A psychologist remarked, "We need to break the stigma around mental health. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but an act of courage." The Candy family's tragedy reminds us that sometimes the strongest seeming people are the ones who need help the most. Pay attention, listen, and always be ready to support those around you. A small conversation can save a life. Despite the investigators' efforts and the psychologist's theories, the truth behind Jonathan's actions will likely remain a mystery. Only Jonathan knew what truly drove him to commit such an act. We can propose countless theories, but in the end, no one can answer for Jonathan. The only thing we can do is learn from this tragedy, ensuring we never have to witness something like it again. A legacy of lessons. Jonathan Candy's story leaves behind more than a family tragedy. It offers a powerful lesson about pressure, silence, and the importance of love and understanding. This case isn't just about crime. It's a reminder to prioritize mental and emotional well-being for ourselves and those around us. You may never fully understand the struggle someone else is enduring, but you can listen, care, and make a difference. Don't wait until it's too late. The Candy family's case is not only a shocking crime, but also a stark warning about what can happen when silent pressures go unaddressed. Neighbors, friends, and even the community failed to notice any red flags before the tragedy unfolded. This case reminds us that sometimes those we love most may be suffering in ways we can't see. We must learn to look deeper, listen more, and ask questions rather than assume everything is fine. The power of listening. In today's fast-paced world, we often become so consumed by our own concerns that we forget to truly listen to those around us. A simple check-in or small act of kindness can sometimes save a life. Psychologists note that individuals struggling with mental health rarely seek help themselves due to shame or fear of judgment. You don't need to be an expert to make a difference. A simple question like, "Are you okay?" or an honest conversation can be life-changing. Never underestimate the power of listening. Despite the irreparable tragedy, the Candy family leaves behind an invaluable lesson. Family and community are essential pillars that help us overcome adversity. The Candy family's story prompted many in their Oklahoma neighborhood to reevaluate their connections with those around them. A neighbor shared, "I used to think that as long as I kept myself stable, that was enough. But after this story, I realized how important it is to care for others too. We don't live solely for ourselves, but also for those around us." Family, friends, and community aren't just shelters. They're immense sources of strength that guide us through our toughest times. Mental health, a conversation we need to have. The tragedy of the Candy family also highlights the urgent need to address mental health. Many still see it as a sensitive or even shameful subject. In reality, acknowledging one's struggles and seeking help is an act of courage, not weakness. Dr. Joni Johnston, a clinical psychologist, once said, "We must dismantle the stigma surrounding mental health. People should feel safe sharing their emotions rather than hiding them." A healthy society relies not just on physical well-being, but also on the emotional strength of its individuals. If you're feeling pressured or in pain, don't hesitate to seek help. Doing so isn't just for your benefit, it also protects those you love from unintended consequences. Hope for the future. Though the tragedy has occurred, this story doesn't signify an ending. It's the beginning of valuable lessons and opportunities for change. The community where the Candy family once lived came together, supporting the youngest boy and collectively honoring the family's memory. A charitable foundation was established to raise mental health awareness, named after Lindsay Candy as a tribute to her. Neighbors pledged to connect more with one another, creating a safer and warmer environment for everyone. This tragedy has shown us the power of unity. While we can't change the past, we can build a better future, one where no one has to endure pain in silence. A message to the audience. Concluding the story, life is a series of connections. Don't let busyness or prejudice make you miss opportunities to care for others. A word, a small gesture, can bring hope to someone who's lost their way. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, remember, you're not alone. There are people ready to listen and help you through. Finally, start by checking in on your loved ones, friends, and colleagues. If you notice someone growing quieter than usual, don't hesitate to reach out. These small acts could save a life. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the story? And don't forget to hit subscribe and like to stay tuned for more gripping stories in the future. I'm Alex Harper, and I'll see you in the next story.